Hi there, I'm Brian Midway, and this is a training session. This, I think, is number 6. Anyway, you'll see on the little screen thing at the bottom. And it's to do with a booklet. There's the booklet. We produced this booklet. We've stolen ideas from everywhere with permission. And so we're just trying to figure out how we can preach the gospel to everybody, make disciples, who can preach the gospel to everybody, who can make disciples, who can preach the gospel to everybody, who can make disciples, who can gather in disciple groups and form churches, who can preach the gospel, make disciples, gather into groups and form churches. Because we have an idea that that is a way of doing it, a process that can see the gospel proclaimed to everybody. We did a survey in our church some time ago and found out that just the people in our church that were in our immediate sphere, that we had connection with, that we could say g'day to because we knew them, at least knew of them, and they knew us and knew of us. There was something like 10 to 15,000 people just in connection with us. But none of us really was very good at preaching the gospel to those people. And so this is where this started for us. And so, we just realised we had to learn how to preach the gospel. I've seen examples of people preaching the gospel with effectiveness to migrants living in Australia, migrants coming to Australia. What I haven't seen yet, I haven't seen Aussies reaching, Australian-born, European Australians born in this country, especially a few generations. And so we've got to reach those people. I don't know how many there are, but I'm not satisfied just reaching migrant people. I think in many ways it's much easier to reach migrant people than it is to reach people who've been, one or more generations of their family in the country. So anyway, we're talking about the tools that do this, and we've been talking about the 3/3 process. We've talked about 4 fields. We've talked about a new lesson, and today we're going to talk about sharing the story. And here's one of the really important tools for sharing the gospel, and that is your story about something that God has done in your life. And so we call this a testimony, and I'm a little worried about just using that because we have so culturally imbibed these words that they mean nothing to us, or they just everything means the same thing. Which some of you have heard Scott McKnight's little talk about the gospel. Did Jesus preach the gospel? And so, I want you to think about this not in terms of how you came to Christ only, but a story that tells something that God did in your life that declares what kind of a God is, not just for you, but for everybody. So every testimony of everything God did, every story is a declaration of the gospel. And if you read the gospel itself, the Gospel of Mark or the Gospel of Matthew, Gospel of Luke, Gospel of John, you see that all it is a collection of stories that involve Jesus saying things, doing things, other people doing things, etc., etc. So it's just a bunch of stories. And the Bible is a bunch of stories. And so we're going to spend a little time on this, and I want you to practice this. We've been getting people to share their testimony in 3 minutes in our regular gatherings that we have, and we've been working hard to make that a sharp, effective story. And so just because God's done something, that doesn't mean to say you're going to be able to tell it in a way that people can understand. And so in this book, we're looking at the page, Telling Your Story. This is the book, this is the page. And so it says here, here's an outline of how you can tell your story. So it's presuming not just the salvation, I came to Christ this way story, but the first is that you've got to tell what your life was like before the change happened. So first of all, you want to tell it in a way that people can identify with. If your experience was so weird and crazy that nobody can identify with it, it might be a wonderful story, but it won't draw people. What's going to draw people is the fact that you were like a lot of other people are before they have any experience of God. So, you just need to think about those details, and when you tell this story, focus on the areas of your life before the change that were changed. So in my own story, one of the things that changed for me was I just had no idea. I had no concept of God at all. I just thought religion was a nice idea, keep people well behaved, all that kind of stuff. And so I was just massively impacted by the fact that a person can actually experience God in your own little world. And God visited me in a way that I undoubtedly was God, and brought about changes and so forth. So I'm going to tell about those changes, and just include the key important issues. Don't tell a whole long story. I was born at an early age, and don't tell all the irrelevant things. Just pick out things. So you might have to write down a whole bunch of things and just choose, out of those 10 things, choose 2 or 3, because in a short time we're going to try and get people to be able to tell their story in less than 3 minutes. And I'm going to tell my story in another of these sessions, just so I can give you an example of that. So the first thing is to tell of your life about the change, before the change. Then say exactly what happened. Don't theologize about it. Don't give all the wisdom that you've gained over the years about that since you've looked at it from the other side. Just tell exactly what happened, how you got from here to there, how this happened, how that happened, to get you in connection with something that God did in your life. Tell what you did and what God did. I was chasing a girl, so I went to church because of her. I went to the church that she took me to, and so I went into that church. I'd never been in that church before, etc., etc. And then the second thing it says here is don't use religious language. So I'm not going to say I went to a premillennial, pre-rapture church, and they no. I'm just saying I walked into this building. It was a Baptist church, and I'd never been in a Baptist church. It looked a bit weird to me. Yeah, whatever. So you're just telling it the way it was, so that people can identify with that. And then the last thing you're going to do is tell what was different after the change. So talk about real and down-to-earth things. Once again, don't exaggerate, don't spiritualize, don't theologize, don't use big words. Just emphasize what God did, what God did and what happened. And so it says this here in these notes, and I think they're helpful, and I think it's a great, we're going to do a checklist next time. It takes 3 minutes or less, so do it quickly. I don't mean rabbit it off, but do it quickly. Tell the story in 3 minutes. If you've got to cut it down, cut it down. A lot of people have great difficulty with this, but the discipline is well worth it, because your listeners will receive much more from a 3-minute story than they will from something that takes 15 minutes to explain. Make sure that the listener can easily relate to what you're saying. So when you write the story out and think about it from the point of view of somebody who knows nothing about God. It's be effective when it provides genuine, down-to-earth account of what God did, free of religious language. It'll be effective when it clearly contrasts the before and the after. It will be effective when it encourages the leader not to see this as some experience that you had that's unique to you because you're so amazing, but something which God does to everybody. So if it declares what God is like, then God will be like that for somebody else, as he was like that for you. It glorifies God and points people to Jesus. It is credible and real, and when it's told in a confident, coherent, and natural way. Okay? And so next time when we meet together, I'm going to talk about how you just go through this process, a checklist. Now, once again, this isn't a checklist because you're so dumb. This is a checklist that you can reproduce. All these things are simplified so that they can be reproduced and sustained. And so, when you come to tell your story, what you need to know is that you've thought about it. It's told well as you can. I'm not talking about oratorical ability. I'm just talking about telling your story confidently, openly. You can do it without reading notes, without all those things, and somebody can receive something from heaven because you've testified to something God did. That's a very exciting thing. And the amazing thing always is that whereas people can say all they like about whether they believe in God, if you tell a story about something that genuinely happened, the way that it happened, they can't do anything else except listen. They can't say, no, that didn't happen. They can say it, but it's your experience and you're telling it. So God bless you.